to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannon O'Hara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Money, money, money. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you know what it is? Jumpstart your receiving and money ease at shannon-o'hara.com/money, where you will find classes, exercises, books that I have personally used to make myself a happy millionaire. What's it going to take for money to come to you with ease and joy and glory? Welcome, everybody out in the world. Consciousness is everywhere today. My guest, and I am so happy that he has finally joined me, is Chris Hughes, who I have been chasing to do a podcast with me for actually a really long time. Our schedules finally synced up, and Chris is joining us today for an extremely interesting and, I would say, educating conversation about the history of wealth, where things come from. Chris is an antiques and antiquities expert. He is also an access consciousness facilitator and has a wealth of information about what creates wealth and the value of things and life being a more beautiful place and space for all of us on Earth. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry I played hard to get for so long, but maybe the time is just what it was meant to be.
Exactly. I gave up stressing out about the way things show up a long time ago because consciousness has a very elegant plan that I trust.
Me too. I love the way you put that. An elegant plan. Fabulous.
So Chris, I'm going to give a little backstory. Chris and I have actually known each other for maybe over 10 years. I remember the first time I met you was in Seoul, Korea.
Was it in Seoul, Korea, or was it in Italy? No, I think it was in Seoul, Korea. And you're right. I think it was like 12 or 13 years.
It was like a million years ago. And I think it was actually, that's the only time I've been to Seoul, but I had like an amazing time. But it was, I think that maybe Dane was doing like a class or something. And I met you there. You were living in Seoul at the time.
Yes. And you were actually, can I just say, now that you're mentioning this, you were one of the first people that really looked me in the eye and said, you have something, you have a presence, you have a gift. You are one of the people that is walking around awake. And there was something about the way you said it to me and the intensity with which you said it, that it was such an invitation for me. I felt acknowledged, like someone was actually seeing me, which was really quite incredible.
Cool. Thank you for telling me that. I don't remember. And I'm, I know that I know so many of us touch people's lives in ways that we oftentimes never know or realize.
Totally.
So we met in Korea, and at the time you were doing voice acting and like really into theater and singing. And
yes, if there was a job that related to the voice, be it singing telegrams or being on the radio or recording voices for elevators, I was doing it.
And so that was sort of like your first love and still one of your great talents. And today, one of the classes that Chris facilitates is called Right Voice for You. And that's an incredible, actually, Chris, do you want to tell people a little bit about what is Right Voice for You?
Right Voice for You is one of the specialty programs in Access Consciousness, and it looks at all the places where you can share your voice with the world and interact with the world around you, not necessarily through singing or writing or public speaking, but it's getting you to take off your mask and show you to the world.
Right. And it's massive for so many people out there, and it's extremely valuable. And today, we're not really going to focus on that in this conversation because, let's face it, both Chris and I have our voices. You've all been listening to my voice. But something but then this is like the really other cool thing that I really want to explore more. So Chris went from voice acting, singing, theater, radio to the universe of beauty, antiquity, antiques, jewelry, gold, silver. You just really dove headfirst. Can you give a little bit of a story or background on how that started for you.
Yes, it was your dad's fault.
Yes.
It was Gary Douglas. See, he was traveling to, see, the funny thing is when all this started, I actually didn't live here in Australia. And next week I have my citizenship examination and interview. I'm becoming an Australian citizen.
Congratulations.
I know. I've been here now over 10 years, but Gary used to come here, and he's always been an antique hunter and lover and collector and hoarder, probably more accurate, but don't tell him I said that.
He knows. He's a self-professed.
Exactly. So he would come here and look around and go, there's not many great antiques in Australia. And for those of you out there living in places like Europe, you come here and you can still smell the paint drying. Everything is very new. We don't have this rich history of settlement other than the Aboriginal people, but that's a can of worms we won't go into. So he'd come here and he went, you know what, we could make an antique shop work. So he started one with somebody, and let's just say it didn't really work for a number of reasons. So he came to me and he said, would you do this? Would you come and manage this shop for me? And mind you, this was 10 years ago. And I said, absolutely not. I said, I can't think of anything so boring as sitting in a shop all day, and all antique dealers seem to have emphysema, and no. And he said, okay, would you consider coming for 1 month and help me? And one of my loves is business and sort of lifting the hood of the car or the bonnet and seeing what's going on with the engine, what's happening in the business. So I said, yeah, I felt like I could do that because I had a marketing background, and went, yeah, okay, I think it'd be fun to see what's going on. So I came for 1 month, and 10 years later, I'm a part owner of the company, and we are international multi-million-dollar antique company.
Yes. Beautiful. Called the Antique Guild.
Yes. Here in Brisbane, Australia.
Yeah. And there's multiple stores. And I don't know. I think if you listen to this podcast, obviously you hear me talk about Gary a lot, i.e. my dad, and you hear him a lot on these podcasts because he is gracious enough to come on here and help us blow our minds. And one of the other things that a lot of people might not know is that Gary is I would say the quintessential Renaissance man. And before he was building this thing called Access Consciousness, he was doing a million different trades and things. He was a horse trainer. He was a real estate agent. And he has always had a deep love for antiques and unusual and unique things. And so
the other thing that I always find amazing about him, you're telling me that, he hated 1,000 things. He was an upholsterer. And if you ever have a stain on a piece of fabric, he's the guy to go to. He can always tell you how to get the stain out.
Yeah, he knows a million things about a million things. He is hugely knowledgeable. And it's like my childhood was sprinkled with a bunch of old haunted things, because he had shops in Santa Barbara where we grew up, and he would bring stuff home and fix it and da-da-da. So a lot of the entity stories of my childhood are antiques related. So he's always had a lot of love for unique things and old things. And he's kept up that trade and that business over the years, in addition to Access. And you've really been a massive component of bringing that stream of creation into what it is today. And one of the things that I've loved, I've been lucky enough to listen to you do a few presentations about different things, and not just antiques, but also jewelry, gold, pearls, stones. You have a wealth of knowledge. Did you start out knowing all this stuff, and how did you get to where you are?
Well, thank you for thank you for the acknowledgement, first of all. But one thing that Gary Douglas really empowered me to do, and he constantly was encouraging of me for, is I'm always willing to do my homework. So I grew up poor. And when I say poor, I mean there were times where I'd say, Mom, what's for dinner? And she'd say, windy pudding, son, because, there was nothing. And so when I was invited to work in this world of antiques with Gary, I went, I got to educate myself. So everything that came in, because working with him, it was like Christmas every day. There were these crates and boxes and suitcases, and sometimes whole shipping containers arriving full of stuff. And each thing arrived, I would go, well, if I'm going to sell this, I need to know, what is it? Who made it? What did they make it from? Why is it valuable? What, like, and I've always found it interesting diving into the background of things and seeing what they were and what they're worth.
So actually, one of the things you just said that I'd love to ask a direct question about is, why are things valuable?
They're not. Value is a point of view. Like, depending on how far you want to blow out this conversation, consciousness includes everything, right? And judges nothing. Judgment creates a separation. Judgment is also what we use to create value. If you go out into the forest and see how all of the different elements of nature contribute to one another, be it the trees and the rocks and the water and the mosses and the insects and et cetera, even the things that have died and are rotting, they all contribute to the ecosystem at large. And the elements in our life are the same way. Dressing your body in gold and diamonds and silks and cashmeres and fine things, filling your house with them, they do contribute. They add an energy. Like if you tap into the energy of filling your house with laminate furniture that you built from a flat pack that's covered in plastic, and something that was carved by hand and then painted or lacquered and decorated to have a unique expression, they contribute something. And in this reality, we attach a monetary value to that. I mean, one of the things that we talk about in Access Consciousness is the only purpose of having money is either changing someone's reality, but moreover, nurturing your body. If we didn't have a body, what would you need money for? We would have to buy food and clothes and a place to live and a car to drive. And depending on how much you're willing to contribute to you and your body, well, that sort of relates to more and more money. Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, yes. I think there's an interesting juxtaposition in that, like both of us, Chris is Canadian. If you guys haven't caught that twang in his voice, that's Canadian. Yeah, that's Canadian. I'm from California. We are both currently in Australia. Like you're residing in Australia. So it's all New World countries, essentially. So you and I, you grew up with maple trees and I grew up with the beach. And it's always been interesting watching Gary, because I have to admit, like I am like in my deepest core, I'm native. I sort of like would be happy to be barefoot and living amongst, the dirt and having, not have to wear clothes. The native lifestyle is like way more natural for me. And so growing up with Gary was interesting because he is quite adept at the beauty and commerce. Like he's really like a merchant of beauty in a lot of ways. And he had to show me this thing about having things in your life that contribute to you. And that's a lot of what you do now, where you facilitate people to recognize they have a choice for something greater. And are they willing to have that can contribute greater in their lives, which, let's face it, is huge for a lot of us. It's like, how many of you guys out there listening right now have like a ceiling or a cap on what you're willing to have in your life? And if it's like, how much would wearing a, $800,000 or $1 million ring on your finger, it's like, is that comfortable for you? Or would that totally blow your mind and change the parameters of how you live your life?
Yeah. Or would you judge it and go, that's ridiculous. No one needs that.
Exactly. No one needs that. That's too much. It's this and that and the other. And I would say, I will admit, like, I used to do that a lot, where I would be like, that's ridiculous that costs so much money. Or why would you put money into that when you could, or you could buy a car, so I would do a lot of that, like judging of the value of something or the necessity of something, all of which was, creating my reality. It wasn't, oh, what would it take to have this and that? And, oh, wow, this kind of beauty could also be in my life. So I think it's a really great conversation also about having and wealth. And I was wondering if you would be interested in talking about some of the cool things about the value of things. as we place value on them, like about gold, silver, or what are some really cool things that you've found out that you think would be interesting for people to know?
Awesome question. And I do get asked variations of this a lot. And what I often say to people is, tying in what I said before about educating yourself, I really built my wealth by looking at the things that naturally I was drawn to. And what started for me with that was silver. Silver is this beautiful mineral that grows in veins in the rocks in the earth. And we've cultivated it over time, and we designate this as a precious metal. Now, when I really started committing to growing my wealth, it was through buying silver. There's this tool within Access Consciousness, which if you may have heard of it, called the 10% account. And it says that for every dollar that comes into your life, take 10% of it and put it away as an honoring of you. Never spend it. Don't spend it on bills. Just allow it to be there. And growing up as poor as I did, having money was always quite a challenge for me. So every time I started my 10% account, I would spend it. And then silver came along. And I'll never forget the pivotal change that occurred for me was buying this little silver bowl and 2 tiny little silver salt dishes with spoons. And my body was so attracted to this shiny white metal. It just loved it. And I think I spent $100 on them at the time, which was my 10% account. Every time I had 10% money, I would put it in silver, because silver is a currency. It's a precious metal that you can watch on the exchange every day, the price of it go up and down. And it wasn't easy if I had a bill or a financial catastrophe to cash it in. Yes, it could be done. I could take it and I could get it melted and I could get the money for it and blah, blah, blah. But the steps to do that, I was always like, too hard. I'll just create the money and sort everything out and still have this 10%. So I'm particularly amazed right now, because having bought silver consistently over the years, over the last 10 years of buying it, I'm over the moon with what it's now worth, having watched it grow over time. When I first started buying silver per kilo in US dollars, it was like $250 a kilo. Now it's $800 or $900 a kilo. So slowly over time, constantly adding to my collection of silver, I've gone from, like, say there's a tray beside me here in my office where I keep all my decanters if I'm working and want to have a little whiskey or something, and it's a solid silver tray. I bought that at scrap metal value, because when I first started adding to my silver, that's what I would do. I would hunt out the bargains where it was like, I knew if I melted it, I'd get my money back. I paid $300 for this tray. That was what it cost to melt it. Today, if I needed money and I melted it, I'd get $1,100 for it. So that's just one little way of educating yourself and finding out. And silver works for me, might not for you. For you, it might be gold, but it's another element that you can wear that contributes to your body. As every Indian housewife knows, it's a way of having wealth with you and knowing that you have money. Because there's a lot of you out there who probably are in a similar place where it's like, yeah, you're awesome at creating money, but having it, which is an energy in your life that contributes so much, having money is a totally different muscle to build.
Beautiful. Exactly. And that willingness to invest in the things that will appreciate. I mean, we live in such a fast, consumptive culture these days that things are produced and thrown away like so rapidly. Never in the history of forever have we had so much available that could just be thrown away tomorrow. It's made quick and it lives quick. Whereas a lot of the things that you broker and deal with were crafted and made over long periods of time by masters. And these things then go on to have really another lifetime long beyond their owner or creator's hands. And That's a very different, I think we tend to, I think a lot of people today too don't even realize that there are other resources and other equivalents of currencies and money like silver, gold, precious stones, etc. They don't even realize that those have a value. They might not even really see the value in them like they do in cash, which actually has no intrinsic value. It's literally has no value. It's just backed by somebody told you it's worth something. So this thing of including these long-term appreciating elements, essentially, in our lives is, I think, kind of like a lost art. You know, most of the malls of today are filled with a lot of not very valuable things, and you'd be hard pressed. I mean, a lot of what I've been watching in the world over the last 10 years, especially, is that a lot of the malls are getting filled with, you're seeing a lot of like lowest common denominator. You're not seeing you're not getting higher and higher quality anymore in the public. You're getting like less and less quality. That's becoming what's primarily available. So I'm really appreciative that something like the Antique Guild exists in Australia, and also Antiques and Possibilities, which is its new store up on the Sunshine Coast of Australia, which is sort of like a really funny thing sticking out like a sore thumb in this beach community. And then you get this store that's just full of these very beautiful, extremely unusual, one-of-a-kind antiques.
Yes, in a town that otherwise every shop you walk by, it's cushions and candles, cushions and candles, cushions and candles. And then we have this like, say what? You can buy fine silver, crystal, china, furniture, you know, it's a totally different world. We have been trained, as you say, especially in the last 10 years, to just buy it and throw it away, buy it and throw it away, buy it and throw it away. What's that doing to the planet? You know, without getting preachy, it's sort of like, I believe in buying once and buying good.
And what's also interesting, I think, about what the stuff that you're dealing with a lot is a lot of the items that you broker in, the skill and the craftsmanship that it took to create those things, whether it's furniture, wood carving, silversmithing, the jewelry, the ivory, the carving, the painting, a lot of those crafts are being lost. And so a lot of the items that you are dealing with in the Antique Guild, and basically essentially that are the ultimate secondhand, you know, items, are going to be so unique because people don't know how to make that stuff anymore. Nor would anybody make that stuff anymore. Totally.
Like say, going back to the example of silver, in Australia, there used to be 280 something odd registered silversmiths. There are now 6.
Right.
So like all this silver, like bowls, platters, cutlery, tea sets, no one's going to make it again because the technology is lost. And it's a bit funny to call it technology. It's more like the art of it.
Right. Because a lot of that skill, that technology is now moving into online computers rather than the cultivation of the beauty of what comes from the earth.
And they are all elements of the earth. Exactly.
Exactly. You know, so a lot of what you broker in essentially is these items, these elements that have come out of the earth that some master, you know, took the time to create with the earth, basically. And that is a lost art. And that's something that we don't see a lot of anymore. And I've learned, I mean, I just love how, I don't know, maybe we could just tack on like a small conversation about pearls, just because I think that's like so interesting. And especially with the earth changes that are going on right now and how much that's affecting pearls and the reality of the pearl market.
Oh, absolutely. Because not all pearls are created equal. Like, say, for example, Her Majesty, the Queen, she wears a very famous double strand of pearls around her neck. And they're not like huge diameter, massive pearls like sometimes we see here in Australia in particular, but they are natural, which went out of, like, they basically became nearly extinct in the 1930s, almost 100 years ago. That double strand of pearls that the Queen wears as a result are worth over £1 million. Now, it doesn't hurt that they were owned by a queen, but that's like pearls being, as we said, with the other precious things being elements of nature. The more we compromise the planet, the harder and harder it is to actually have and harvest these things. Like, yeah, we've developed a technology where we can go down and seed oysters so that they produce pearls, and like Australia is particularly adept at that. But as ocean temperatures rise, even a half a degree, the climate is gone for the oysters to actually do that. The other thing that's occurring that's jeopardizing oyster populations is runoff of pesticides from the land around is getting into the oceans, and it's causing mass bleaching of the reefs, but it's also eradicating oyster populations.
And what does that do then to the value of the pearls that we already have?
Well, they skyrocket because, as I say, we still love them, and there's a part of us, even if it's not cognitive, that recognizes the value of them and recognizes what they are for our bodies. And if they're gone, these things will become the relics that once were the true elegance of living that are no longer available to us. In a world where everything's printed or a 3D hologram, having the real thing is something else. Like, I go back to the dining table that my husband and I eat on every day. We bought it with money that we received from our wedding. And that table was made in 1750, long before the white man walked on Australia. And when we sit there, we can perceive the conversations, the meals, the glasses of wine that were all enjoyed around that table. I mean, you go to a showroom of today's furniture, which some of these furniture manufacturers are even advertise. Is it time to put your old stuff on the curb and go buy new? There's just nothing in them. The energy they contribute to you and your body is almost non-existent.
Well, something that you just said a minute ago about what's real, which I think is actually probably, for me, the most profound part of this conversation is we've really lost track of what's real. And like that there are things that are real, that really come from the earth, that we are now
synthesized.
We are now currently living through a time of huge endangerment of a lot of these real sources and substances, like pearls, just as one example. But that example, I mean, we could go on and on about that, but having what's real. And so what I'm constantly shocked about, and I'm sort of repeating this, is like how when you go and you walk around a mall or a shopping street, if you look at each and every one of those shops, how many of them are actually selling things that are real? Or are they selling things that have been synthetically produced or that have a very short lifespan? I mean, I noticed that even my Apple computer, my Apple iPhones are lasting less and less time. They're building and creating this technology to last less long so that you have to throw it away and get a new one. And that's where we're living in now. It's sort of like buy it quick, use it, and then replace it. Whereas when you have something that's real, like a strand of natural pearls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, these things are so unique and so valuable that they cannot be replaced. All of you guys out there listening, it's like, do you value things that are unique and real? And like, I think that whole real thing is such an interesting, oh my God, that's such a huge aspect of this conversation. Because even a lot of the food that we eat nowadays isn't even real. Yeah. So it's sort of it's a very strange time in society where people don't even really know what's real anymore. Like most people wouldn't know what a natural pearl was compared to a manufactured or farmed or laboratory made pearl. But you do know the difference. Can you tell people?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing to look for straight away that'll tell you whether it's a natural pearl or if it's just plastic is rub it against your teeth. And if you rub it against your teeth and it's gritty, it's a pearl. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a natural pearl, but that's the first way of knowing whether you're dealing with something genuine or artificial. Because the cultured ones, there still is an element to them that is genuine, and they can have massive value. But beyond that, if you want to know if it's absolutely natural, to the naked eye, very, very difficult. What you actually need to do is x-ray them and find out if it has been seeded to culture it or if it's natural. And my dentist is kind enough to x-ray them for me. So that's what I do.
Oh my God, I love that.
True what you say. I mean, the difference between real, I reckon we're going to get to a time very soon where people don't even remember what a carrot used to taste like.
Yeah, let alone what a real pearl is.
Yeah. You know, like in our new house, we've just moved. There's a little organic market 2 blocks away. And I love it because you go there and the fruit and veg all looks weird. Like the average supermarket probably wouldn't put it on their shelves because it's like funny shaped and it still has dirt on it. And oh my God, it tastes so good. And it's more expensive. So my question to everyone out there, would you be willing to create the money to allow you to nurture your bodies with what's real?
I love that. And with that, I think that we can help people find you. So Chris, so if they want to explore more of this, is there a place that people can go and view or opt in to hear some of your lectures on gems, precious metals, antiques, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to the antiqueguild.com.au, and that is a great source for our antique business. And there's also some articles on there, and we have a really great YouTube channel. But if you want to contact me, and I do classes on this as well as Right Voices, Shannon mentioned, and some of the other Access Consciousness core classes, my website is www.mrchristopherhughes.com, and that's MR for Mr. So you can reach me there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming and talking about what's real and adding some value to all of our lives.
You are so welcome.
I hope everybody out there listening to this is questioning what is real. And thanks everybody for listening.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on shannon-o'hara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.